let's get into some of this content and talk about a topic that's very relevant for all of us, and it's why you're here today. I think you have to advance the slide, Josh.
I do indeed. It's unfrozen, and it is unfrozen.
All right, so most of you hopefully are familiar with my boss. That's Josh on the left, but I'll let him. He's going to kind of take over from here in a second. I'm Alex Oftelie, BWF. And I oversee decision science practice, of which a lot of the things that we're talking about today are related. So data science, engagement science, prospect management, prospect development, and how AI can help us improve and scale our abilities with those things. So really excited to be here today to talk about our approach, our vision, and give you all some recommendations and hopefully spawn some ideas to what's next for your shop.
And hi, everyone. Really good to be here and be alongside Alex, someone I've learned so much from over the years. I like to say he's a real data scientist, and I play one on television because I'm speaking and talking about it a lot more than doing it. And I'm like, oh yeah, we can do this thing. And I'm like, Alex, can we do this thing? And he's like, yes, we can do this thing. And we've accomplished a lot of amazing stuff together. So it's really fun to kind of be in this partnership for many years. It's our second decade working together for sure. A lot of people know me from the analytics space because that's where I got my start. I was doing data science work at Minnesota. I joined the firm in 2004. In those early years, we're setting up a lot of analytics programs, in-house programs, and then developing out how we integrate data and data science into campaign work, into prospecting, into lots of different areas. And the one thing I've been exposed to is over the years how much this has changed. From the time I started in development in the mid-90s till today, but even all that had gone before and all the evidence of the ways that we've continued to advance the ecosystem of fundraising, to make fundraising better, how we're all fundraisers and how our whole organization raises money together, and how we use data, technology, and innovation to make the world a better place. And I know that sounds cliched. I've watched enough episodes of Silicon Valley, like we're using middleware code to make the world a better place, but
yeah, middle out.
That's right, middle out. But we're all actually in the profession that does make the world a better place. We're all in service of nonprofits. The nonprofit sector is essential. We believe in it. Our firm is committed to making it better, doing all we can. Our measure of success is that this industry is better, it's more effective, people are doing amazing things, and that we're alongside you on the journey. So I'm gonna give it back to Alex to start us out in the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So we have a lot of ground to cover, many miles to go, but we're really excited about this. But to kind of give us a little context as we're talking through and to see who's participating, Josh, if you should go to the next slide. Just want to know a little bit of the state of where you all are, right? So a lot of people are talking about this. Obviously, there's interest and attention on this, hence you're being here in this conversation today. So we have a little poll, and if our wonderful colleague Lauren can post this up for us, it's just how prepared is your organization, let's just say today, to integrate AI into your business, whatever your business is. So we'll give that a minute here. Well, I feel like I'm on American Idol right now. This is exciting. But yeah, a lot of people have interest or ideas and questions, and it's pretty interesting to see kind of where people are in terms of their preparedness and where they already started. All right, I'm gonna give it.
Like me, I'm thinking Chuck Woolery, and you go American Idol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give it 5 more seconds here. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Hopefully everyone can see the poll results. That it looks like well, a full 23% have already started. That's really exciting. So I hope as we get towards the end of this conversation and we have the ability to ask questions as we're going through and you're seeing stuff, add some of your commentary to the chat, and feel free to contribute. You know, we're sharing what we're doing and what we're excited about, but we love this community because we can learn from you all too. And there's a lot of places that are planning and haven't started, but might be planning at some point too, right? So that's a little, it's a little under 60% there as well too. So this is you're right in line with where we're seeing in the industry today. So very excited to kind of give you our perspectives and move ahead.
Excellent. All right, I think I'm closing this appropriately. Then I'm going to move on to the next slide. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit is how did we get started in all of this? Oh, I think I paused it, resume share. Bring the slide deck back up. How we got started in all of this. And I've been thinking about it. One benefit that I've had is for, I don't know, since 2011. So 12 years, I've been teaching a class at Rice University. Alex is also an instructor there, as his other colleagues at BWF, on fundraising analytics and the history of analytics. And one of my favorite things about that class is talking about how did data being used in fundraising really emerge over time. So I took some of those concepts and I thought, let's take that all the way to AI now. And it's been an amazing change that we've seen. And I want to talk through that history. If any of you take my class at Rice, you're going to be a little familiar with where I lay some of the background. But I'm going to move that up to where we are today, how AI is being talked about and how it's being used in some cases, how it's being hoped to be used in other cases. And Alex is going to talk a little bit about how BWF is using AI and what we're building here as well. So hopefully there's a lot of food for thought. We're learning as we go too. I can tell you with the rise of AI feels like the internet boom. It feels like the social media boom. I mean, NVIDIA hitting $1 trillion, the chip that the chip maker, of course. So it's really a fascinating topic that we're in right now. So I'm going to talk about how do we get here. And I'm going to start with the 1970s. And the 1970s are relevant is because it was the first time we started to distribute the tasks of fundraising. Like you could argue there have been fundraisers since ancient times. You know, someone raised a capital campaign to build a pyramid, probably. Like there was probably fundraisers throughout time, and you can argue that there has been. But when it became a business, and what I mean by distributed tasks, was really it emerged in the 70s as a development profession, and very simply, maybe one person asks for money and another person records the gifts. So we took tasks and we started to distribute it into business functions. And that really was a kind of a precursor, because before this point, you'd find the people, you'd ask them for money, you'd record the money, you would do all the stuff yourself. And every organization, as organizations grow, roles narrow and they distribute. It's just sort of a kind of a rule of growth, a rule of scaling, that we get more efficiency per labor hour and more output per person. But the development profession really emerged in the 70s. Now, back then, everyone said information was hard to find, and I heard all these stories about it. They were in some dark basement, and I always imagined something nasty like this. Like, oh, this was our donor records back in the day. Someone had to go down to a basement and so forth. And there were a few people that were starting to gather information at this point, which started to move their way into the first prospect researchers, which formally emerged as a profession in the next decade. The 1980s, probably my favorite decade for pop culture, being a kid there, and I still collect action figures, my Star Wars toys, just like I did in the 1980s. But in the 1980s in fundraising, we saw the prospect research profession emerge. Now, this was relevant because this is the first time we took information and we staffed information gathering to be applied for a fundraising purpose. Now, obviously, this is human intelligence, not artificial intelligence, but it's relevant that we decided in the 80s that we should begin staffing strategic information in the context of fundraising. And where it really emerged initially was what I would call a pre-solicitation risk management. If we ask for the wrong amount of the wrong person at the wrong time, we risk not getting that gift. So we took that information to prepare for solicitation for prospects we were cultivating, so that we could increase our odds of closing that gift. Bobby Strand and Susan Hunt, they edited the first book. Bobby Strand, someone, of course, we're extremely proud of at BWF, longtime partner here, and often credited as establishing this profession and laying the groundwork for the APRA organization and this profession that many of us on the call probably are very familiar with, or maybe had our start in. I had my start in prospect research as well. And the quote that I love from this book is a quote that refers to the narrow focus of how information was used. A productive research system must keep research in perspective. It has only one purpose: to support the cultivation solicitation effort. Unless prospects become donors, research will be in vain. Very focused, very focused. And I have another quote from Bobby in 2008 in a later section and how much that has evolved. So now we move into the 1990s. These are my college years and my beginning years in fundraising as well. And the thing that changed probably the most, which shifted our attention on how do we apply information, is the campaign model. We saw a tremendous growth in comprehensive campaigns. So fundraising shifted from raising for single incremental efforts to the campaign for, and then pick your university, or the Emory campaign here, or the I have some examples of different campaign things from the 1990s. And what that meant is we needed to find enough prospects for these campaigns. And the only function that was doing research was in the already cultivation, the pre-solicitation effort, which was our prospect researchers. So in the 90s, we started to hear things like proactive prospect research and prospect identification emerging as a business function. The need to identify prospects started to emerge in the 90s. And because of that, we started to see a new tool set, a group of tools and providers of data that we could use to provide some scale to that lead generation process. Screening was the first one where you would wealth screen directly from, I think this was a Wayback Machine. Look at Netscape 3.0 is now out. You could go right to Dun & Bradstreet and get public or private company information. You could go right to LexisNexis and you do single asset. Also during the 90s, we went from screening existing all the way through the comprehensive one-stop shopping around screening. I know we had Prospect Select at the time. PIN was emerging. There was a lot of the companies were creating new systems where you go to one place and they would hit against many databases, a method that is still very much in use today to gather that information. The other thing that changed in the 90s, which is very relevant to our ability to do different things with data, is relational databases. Before this time, storing information was a lot like the file cabinet, but it was digital. You'd have one record and you have to go to the next record and have all the information. But once we had relational databases, the concept of a primary key where we could link to lots of different tables enabled us to have way more information on any one person or on any one process. And so the amount of data at our fingertips was growing rapidly in the 90s. We were starting to think about lead generation. And also around that time, we started to see geodemographic cluster type of things. You heard concepts like from Mark Penn on the soccer moms, some of the early personas, and you heard about things gathering people by like demographics. It used to be you'd target one zip code and find others that had similar demographic considerations. So we're starting to group people, think analytically. We saw some of the early models from a consumer marketing perspective. Now in the 2000s is when we really started to see the rise in analytics as it appeared in fundraising. I think it was about 2001 when my title as an analyst at the University of Minnesota was emerged to do this full time. Of course, the names kept changing. It was operations research, applied statistics, data mining. We started to hear the word analytics in the 2000s, probably most popularized by Tom Davenport's book, Competing on Analytics, and the preceding articles in Harvard Business Review along that same name, along that same title of analytics. And he, back in Competing on Analytics in 2007, when that book came out, he said in 10 years from now, all the companies that will be the best companies in the world will have achieved their competitive position by using data. So we started to see data jokes. I used to think correlation implied causation. Then I took a statistics class. Now I don't know. Sounds like the class helped. Well, maybe. So that's appeals to at least one of us. I'm laughing inside and I move it on. I know one of the first projects when I was a consultant with BWF was working with MIT and building their some of their initial predictive models. But what I loved about it is when I was developing models earlier, I had access to some people at Fair Isaac and a few other companies in the Minneapolis area where I'm from. And they talked about how the credit score came to be. And it was almost the exact same use case. They talked about underwriting. Underwriting was a process of researching, not too different from prospect research, actually, researching somebody to determine, do they have the ability to pay back this loan? And do we think they will pay back this loan? And it took a lot of work. And they started to realize that there's some that that to underwrite someone and not give them a loan was a high cost of staff time. And so decades before this time, Fair Isaac was the first to come up with what we all know is the credit score, probably the most ubiquitous predictive model in the marketplace, where they looked at those that were sure no's versus sure yeses. And they said, under this level, people never clear underwriting, so we won't even do the underwriting under this level. But it was one of the first times there was a pre-research filtering process by using a predictive algorithm. So instead of looking at 7 or 8 loan applicants for every one we give, now we can look at 3 or 4 applicants for every one loan we give, doubling the output of our underwriting, increasing the volume of profitable loan arrangements. And I remember chatting with some of my friends at MIT, maybe some of you were on this call. I remember, I think Rob Scott, Kristen Harold were on the call, maybe Shelley Brown over at Boston Children's. And we were chatting, and it was a very similar use case. Our researchers are looking at 7 or 8 names for every one name we pass forward to a gift officer. Now, in the context of what emerged in the 90s, we have a volume of prospects we need to identify for this campaign. If we follow how long it takes to rate each name and what our conversion rate is, we're not going to find enough prospects unless we get the ratio down. So that use case was a very common use case for why many people invested in analytics initially, which was a pre-prospect research vetting of who's more likely to go through to the next step, so we could increase, even double or triple the output of prospect development. Almost the same, the way the credit score as the same as a prospecting model. Where they're different is, and I'll get a little bit statistically nerdy though, in a credit score, if you're going to try to predict if someone paid back a loan, your first question is, well, have they paid back other loans? So that's an endogenous concept. In prospecting, is someone going to pay back a loan? If you said, or is someone going to give a major gift? If your first question was, well, have they given other major gifts? You've already identified that name. So we needed to use exogenous data not related to already having done the behavior to find lookalikes. So that led us to the 2010s. So we were applying analytics primarily data science as a pre-prospect research activity. We did also see some growth in direct response segmentation and so forth during that time frame. In the 2000s, it moved beyond the tech folks and the prospect development folks to data being part of just the conversation. The biggest change was in the rise of behavioral economics. No one would have predicted a non-fiction genre would start outselling fiction genres, but we had this growth. Maybe Freakonomics was the first one. A lot of people that I've heard talk about the first behavioral economics type of book that they bought. But there was this big change, and I like to summarize the change under the word actually. We had so many, it used to be called the old wives' tales or prevailing wisdom, or like we've always done it that way. And collectively across industry, people started asking the question, actually, what's actually happening here? Why are people making the choices they do? Choices that might seem irrational when it comes to economics. A little nod to Dan right above the word finding there, Dan Ariely. But it was the ubiquity of data and business and asking those questions, doing small scale tests like the y-axis with John Liss to very large scale tests, signal and noise with Nate Silver, where we're applying data science, looking at the different approaches to how we think. And Thaler obviously was the first Nobel Prize winner for economics, representing behavioral economics, author of Nudge, Misbehaving, and other awesome books. Many that I know are sitting on Alex's desk right now, because I was just looking at them with him a couple hours ago. So a big rise in behavioral economics. And as you recall, Davenport made a prediction in 2007. So what happened in 2017? We looked at all the top companies in 2017. And what we did is we took the top companies by market cap, which represented, there was about 7 sectors that represented the top 20 companies when we refined down to their industries. And in 2017, these were the top 7. And every one of them had a statement of how they use data science to achieve their competitive position. From Google, which is maybe apparent in Amazon, but to even recipes at Johnson at Kraft, data attributes on products at Johnson & Johnson, to Watson, which has definitely been a game changer at AT&T, and right across the board. So Davenport was right. And certainly for us, it achieved a competitive advantage of sorts in fundraising. Not that we're necessarily competing, but it was definitely a factor of growth. how much it had an impact on positive impact on fundraising. This was from that same year in 2017, and we had been surveying year after year, and data science was firmly established as a function. Many was in-house, many more paying providers to do that work, but no question that it had using data for fundraising was having a positive impact, which leads us today. We're in a new decade. We've had a lot of changes in the last 3 years. I'm not going to explain what those changes are because we've all lived through all those changes. But some of the things as are relevant to this lead us to our conversation of AI. One of them is the rapid growth in digital marketing, automation, integration, how we are realizing that fundraising is competing for attention, and we're competing right alongside YouTube and TikTok with other companies. We're not competing with other universities or healthcare organizations or human services. When you're going on a YouTube, are you seeing an ad for me, it might be a new guitar amp because I play a fair bit of bass guitar or some other, or I might see an ad for St. Jude or an ad for Charity Water, where we're seeing a competing for a marketing journey, knowing where people's attention is and how do we engage, warm, and build people, knowing that we're always listening, and how do we tap into the digital marketplace as it exists right now. And also knowing that affinity data is dynamic. Like, we've always known that there's been some degree of people have capacity to give a gift and they have propensity to give a gift. Propensity was always the ill-defined because there's a lot of factors that go into it. And Alex has probably done more research on this than anybody around sentiment, feelings, and what actually drives the decision to make a gift from a very behavioral economics perspective. But we've also realized that affinity is not static. Right after I go to a play or a show, I love the theater a lot more than 3 years later. Or when I had a positive outcome at the hospital, I have more positive feelings of gratitude. How do we capture the dynamic nature of affinity? It requires us to have a dynamic nature to our data, and how the drivers themselves change over time based on various circumstances. I often like to think one of our colleagues was the captain of her basketball team in college, and my spouse went to school on a volleyball scholarship and dropped out of volleyball 2 weeks in. Both of them on their database probably says college athlete, but that might mean different to one person than the other. Can we pick up the nuance that even within data, a static figure like that might mean different things to different people? So we're starting to ask questions about the data and the nuance within the data. And that led to what's seen as a big growth in automation, scaling decision-making processes, dynamic algorithms, and real-time reporting. And I don't mean this to be like buzzy words, but if like the credit score is an automated model, we know what your debt to credit ratio, do you pay your loans back, things like that is a good are the indicators, and the score changes because I missed a few payments, or I suddenly have 2 new credit cards I didn't have before. My data's changed, but the factors have stayed pretty fixed. So it's a representative of the changing data. So we started to see automation around fixed data point with changing data. But also another fixed data point with changing data is really business intelligence and dashboards. How's our performance improving, decreasing? Our forecasts on this campaign? What's our performance against campaign priorities, visits, actions that gift officers might do, segments? So the real-time reporting, waiting a month would be too long to maybe make the changes, and BI has been able to become much more automated. And what we've also seen in this decade or in these last 3 years is partly because of pandemic and also the ongoing staffing challenges in our space, hitting not just the frontline, but operational infrastructure in all areas of fundraising, is a rapid growth in third-party managed data science services, paying companies like ours, companies like others. There's a lot of amazing places out there that are fractional data scientists for clients, doing specific projects. Maybe a team has data scientists, but we need to do this big project, paying a company to do that, who might have the technical capacity to match up with your domain expertise. And so last but not least, in terms of what's applying to fundraising, is AI. And where that conversation is right now, probably driven the most by the rapid growth of generative AI. which is the Chat GPT that we're familiar with, the one that some people are terrified of and some people are super excited, and most of us are somewhere in between. Like maybe we have some concerns, but this is kind of cool to play with. How it's helping me with recipes, or it's helping me with some content. I actually was doing a presentation earlier this year in January. I was speaking for a faith-based fundraising conference, and my task was to come up with ways to increase giving to faith-based causes. So I spent a whole week, researching, writing this paper, and I had probably 8 main premise points. After I finished, I went into ChatGPT and I was just curious, and I was like, I'm just curious, how would you increase? I said, describe how you might increase giving to faith-based causes. And it spit out like a summary that had 7 points that overlapped with 7 of my 8 points. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. What that could have done for ideation and generation. But it's a question that we're all asking, because it can help create content. It can help create code to help us. A lot of people know that if they're coding in R, the time it takes to code some of those things, I could see how a generative AI could help with some of that code. Using for prompts and nudges, maybe you should contact this person or that person. We've seen a little bit of that in some of the early GPT-2 applications and so forth. But there's futures of work concerns. There's also future of work excitement. But that's not the only aspect of AI. It's the one that's popular right now. And it's interesting because it might lead towards enabling us to provide personalization at scale so that every person can have a personal relationship beyond the capacity of our limited staffing. So there's a lot of opportunity there in testing content and testing what works, what doesn't work to increase the volume of our small scale testing. There could be a lot that generative content does. Prospect ID is another area. Alex is going to dig into the details on some of these, where it's not just snapshot predictive models or automated fixed scores, but actually the nuance of having a new analyst every single day to run the process. I don't know how that works. Alex does. So in a moment, you'll hear from him a little bit about AI and Prospect ID. Recommending next actions. We've seen a little bit of that in some providers. There's opportunities there. Simulating business. In our business as campaign and fundraising consultants, on top of the technology lines and digital marketing lines of our business, we're asked to say, how much do we think you can raise by what date? But those drivers, they're changing. And can we be dynamic with those changing drivers? It's a business question that we're certainly asking. The donor journeys, as people are on a journey, their data is changing. The drivers of their journey is changing. How do we align to what makes the best donor experience for each donor, connecting it with those marketing automation investments that we've all made into our Marketo, our Marketing Cloud, our HubSpots, so that we can be purposeful and proactive in the journey that gets a donor closer to us. And then where Alex is the real innovator in this space around constituent perception. And so that I don't steal thunder from him, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the slide deck down, and as he brings up this part 2, but I'm going to use this moment to just check if there's any Q&A questions that we could address, and I will take a look.
There are 2 in there. You want to address one while I'm...
Sure. I'm going to start with the first one, which is, how would you advocate for incorporating AI into a business without sacrificing anyone's positions? Thank you. I think that's the question that we're all thinking about. And I'm going to probably steal Alex's thunder, because the quote that he often reminds me, and if it is your quote, please forgive me, Alex, but I know you always tell me that AI will not replace fundraisers, but fundraisers using AI will replace fundraisers that don't. And I think that's not a bad perspective. It's like certainly there has been disruption and other innovations. We've seen how the gig economy with Uber and Lyft did to the cab companies. Did they lose their jobs? That's one take. Or did we rethink an industry that created more jobs? That's another take. Is it somewhere in between? Probably. Similar with the GPS, as Thaler would call it, in what sounds political, but it's not at all, libertarian paternalism. It's non-judgmental. Here's your best path forward that helps a human be more effective. So the GPS, it says, here's your best route from point A to point B. And you still have the agency of choice, which is key to his nudge theory, and that's why it works. It shows you the clearest path without actually taking that choice away. I think that's a legitimate question. I'm more anxious to pursue positive outcomes that increase the scale of people, knowing that we are an understaffed profession, and how we provide more value. And I think those that provide more value will be those that leverage this in an effective way. So I don't know, that was just a start to an answer. I see that there's some other questions on here, and maybe we will save those to the end because I gave enough time for Alex to bring his slides up, and then we'll jump into the other questions after that.
Sure, thanks, Josh. So Josh kind of gave us that overview, including Rebecca Black photo and Nirvana and Napster and all those kind of memories. So if we can all kind of come back to the present and kind of the path forward. Josh kind of outlined some of the applications, and I want to talk a little bit more in depth around how we've been building and designing and integrating these applications with some of these use cases for some of our clients. And our hope is that this kind of inspires you or shows you some of the ways that this technology can be used or is currently being used by some of your peers that you may not know. So, a couple things that are really important and really outline our thinking and our approach to leveraging this technology. And the first and probably one of the most important ones is kind of really just meeting your speed. And so what do I mean by that? I mean speed of business and speed of data. So for any kind of model or technology to really produce something different, it needs new information, right? So how often is our information changing that we can do that? We were talking about generative AI at the top, and without making this a political discussion, generative AI data set stopped before 2021. So if you go use generative AI, it still thinks Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, right? So that data has not been updated. And so now you're creating content around that. So understanding the data coming in, how often that's changing is a really important question. And then how often are we going to use and deploy this information created by whatever we're developing? How often do we need this? How often do we want this? And so if it's a once a year process, maybe we can create it once a year when we need it. If it needs to be more often, we have tools that can help us leverage and scale what we need. But what we try not to do, and what we always talk about clients not doing, is making exciting investments in things that don't really meet their speed of data or speed of business. So really understand and be honest with yourself at the beginning. This is a once a year thing, and it's because the data moves really slowly and we only ever review this once a year. Maybe investing a lot of money to build a system that might update every hour doesn't really make a lot of sense for our business needs. So let's be honest about those conversations. Some things speed of business is pretty fast. Some things speed of data is fast. Others it's not. It's a spectrum. So understand your business questions from that perspective. We really believe in line of sight. Transparency is essential to building integration, creating trust within the organization. Josh is a smart guy, but Josh can't just show up to clients and be like, I'm a smart guy, I can't tell you what's going on here, but just trust me, move ahead and put the organization's future on the line, right? So we really believe in development around creating as much transparency and line of sight into what's going on, what's happening, and what's changing as possible. And we really recommend and advocate everyone else in the marketplace do that, whether you're creating something yourself or you're engaging with a partner to do that you really advocate for as much line of sight and transparency and understanding as you can develop. Certainly design build is very, very important. A lot of these technologies are pretty exciting. There's some pretty powerful stuff. They're not just plug and play. We can't just set this up and away we go. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, and especially for our world, right? And our world being the fundraising space. And fundraising inherently is a psychological behavior, is an irrational behavior. So 1 + 1 now does not always equal 2 in terms of what happens. And so we can't just set something up and expect logically things to flow and work. So be very thoughtful, again, whether you're creating something or you're partnering with someone else to develop something, really design build to get what you want and need instead of just trying to plug something or fit to what a technology can do. to someone that had the question earlier, Josh really addressed this a little bit. Our belief is still that these technologies are yes and they add capacity to what we can do, and they add capacity to allow us to scale our reach and scale our impact. But fundraising still comes from having a compelling case for support and sharing that message and increasing engagement. And these are all things that we can drive and direct. And so this can allow us to, where it makes sense, reach people in a more timely manner or understand and change our business in a more effective, timely way. But I don't see this anytime in the near future replacing fundraising. Fundraising is still going to be the province of people. And so this can help us scale. So everything we're doing is building on top of. Josh mentioned a little bit at the top. We were very excited this past March to announce a partnership with IBM, specifically IBM Watson, and they have AI applications and a platform that we've been using to develop solutions for our clients. This has been a really exciting step forward for us and big for our innovation and to kind of meet client needs and kind of really extend the marketplace out. Also, just personally exciting for me, I'm willing to defenestrate myself on this webinar. One of the reasons we're connected with IBM is I'm an IBMer. I worked at IBM for 3.5 years. And so I have a lot of experience with these platforms. And we're talking integrating AI going back to 2015, 2016, right? 7-8 years ago. And I have a lot of experiences where things didn't develop the way we thought they would have and learned from that. And also a lot of experiences where we had success. And this was in industry and lots of other applications. And so it's really exciting for me and our larger team to be able to use that experience, that learning, that understanding from design to technology applications, things to be aware of, to really allow us to build up our service offerings to where we are today. That was also before I grew a beard, and then the beard got gray too. So I think this is like circa 2014, maybe 2015. But I have a lot of experience with this platform, and it's really exciting to have that partnership today. Again, Josh mentioned there's lots of applications in fundraising. We're going to talk about other things besides generative content, because we think these are under highlighted in the industry, and everyone's focused around, can I write a compelling message or create a photo where I have 9 fingers on a hand or something like that, right? You've seen all this stuff in generative content, generative AI. That's very, very exciting, and that will be a part of our future moving ahead. But I want to focus on more of the traditional data science aligned applications. As Josh talked about, prospect ID, recommendation, you can see them all listed on the screen. So these are the things that we are actively developing using those principles: speed of data, design, build, line of sight, yes and. These are the things that we are developing and partnering with clients and to help them scale their business, have greater impact, greater reach, and greater efficiency, all in the service of helping us raise more money, which is our ultimate end goal. And we talk a little about kind of prospect ID. There's a lot of content on this slide, maybe a little bit much to kind of talk through. Well, the slide deck will be available, I believe, after this webinar. But talking with one of our first clients that was doing this, BWF, we've been very fortunate. We've had a lot of very talented data scientists work for us for a long, long time. And I was talking to the client, and they're like, well, what's different between what you do and what this can do? And I'm saying, well, we're scaling. So it's my colleague, Andy Schultz. It's like, we're scaling Andy Schultz. And Andy Schultz can be available on demand if you want, quote unquote, Andy to be available to run this every 7 seconds. That was what you needed. That's available to us. And it's going to understand parameters and do some hyperparameter optimizations to figure out algorithms and fine tune and adjust. But we have also built it with this expert design. And this is very important. We're going to talk about this again toward the end, is this idea around design, build, and being thoughtful. And with our industry and the behaviors that we're trying to understand and predict, specifically as it relates to constituent behavior, our ability to not just plug something in and go, but thoughtfully understand and set up a platform to allow us to extend our work is important. Because let me tell you what happened. We were doing some beta testing with a client data set. The client data set was an anonymized data set of a major university. And there's some really fantastic hyperparameter optimization functions within this Watson AI platform to help us kind of select data that's important the way Andy would and choose algorithms. And I said, you know what? Let's not do it the way Andy would. Just let the platform take it. And so we ended up building this model, and the model ended up telling us that like the most important feature for giving a gift to this organization, a gift at any level, was being an alumni or an alum. But it was a negative factor. Why? Because they had so many alums, but very few of them had actually made a gift. And so without kind of knowing that, the system doesn't know that, oh, well, that might be a statistical reality, but I can't go back to the VP of development of this university and say, hey, look, here's this model. And it means all alumni are less likely to make a gift, right? So all intrinsically, we all know that with the ratios and distributions of prospects across a database, that might be true. We might have more non-alumni or alumni who are non-donors than non-alumni who are non-donors in a database. But we all also, especially if you've built models, we know enough to say, well, that might be a statistical reality. I don't think that's really going to help us move our business forward by scoring all of our alumni non-donors in a negative way. So the tools are powerful, but they understand the data as it's coded. They don't understand the data as context. And that's why we need to be thoughtful in terms of this design. We can build this into a platform that can allow us to extend, and you essentially have the capabilities of a full-time expert data scientist, but it's scaled to meet whatever speed of business and demand that you needed. So that's very exciting. As Josh mentioned, and one of the things I've been most excited about since I came back to BWF when I left IBM is how much analytics we're really applying internally within organizations, which has been a real development. We're not just looking out at the people we know, we're looking within at the work that we do, right? Which is very exciting. And we're building out campaign-powered gift tables, AI-powered gift tables, production forecasts with confidence parameters around them. Like I think based upon the new macroeconomic conditions, plus the gifts that we raised over the last 6 months, this is probably what the next 2 years will be, with as good as this and as could be as poor as this. But this is happening real time and available for leadership on demand so they can have those insights whenever we want. So traditionally, we might have Emma Hinkie on our team, Director of Data Science, produce this stuff. But now this is available for our clients whenever they need it, whenever it makes sense to meet their speed of business and their speed of data. Action recommendation. I know Josh mentioned there's already companies, there's lots of opportunities for action recommendations. You should email this person. This is where we should be focused. We're excited about these opportunities as well. Again, bringing in available analytics resources, scores, business model considerations, timing, staging, lots of elements to say, hey, this is where we should be focusing. This is our plan of action to give us kind of a thought forward into what's happening moving ahead. And again, it's all in this idea around scaling what we would do apply if we had 100 Emma Hinkies working on everyone's portfolio all the time, right? So, this is just a few of them. We talked a little bit too in the engagement science space, which, as Josh mentioned, is something that BWF is very excited about. We believe people don't give because of who you are, you give because of how you feel. And we have a lot of data about who you are and what you do. We don't have a lot of data about what you think and how you feel. And so we're starting to see organizations expand their investment in that space. And we're starting to partner with clients as they're beginning to understand the relationship around what's driving engagement, which for us is a perception, right? I feel engaged with this organization emotionally. What's driving that? What's moving the needle? How can we predict that? And then helping us understand what's the actionable constituency within our organization, right? So it might be a common reality of an organization we work with. We'll just, again, use Hire It as an example, where they might have 100,000 alumni and maybe 20,000 have ever made a gift. Well, what about the other 80,000? Well, some might and some might not. Well, how do we know about that? They both haven't made a gift. Where do we go from there? So understanding and being able to scale out and predict engagement data and adjust that as we understand more about them, or we understand more about people like them, allows us and gives us greater line of sight beyond activity and behavior into the future and untapped potential, untapped opportunity across our constituencies too. So I didn't add that to this presentation, Dick. If we went through all of our use cases that we're actively building right now, we need a half-day webinar, and we don't have a lot of time for that, and I don't think you want to give us that amount of your attention. But there's a lot of opportunities and applications here beyond just prospect ID and predictive modeling. I understand that's still a very popular one. It's still got a great amount of ROI for us, but a lot of the things that we currently do in business to help us raise more money can be driven and scaled and optimized through building through some AI applications. So we talked about the exciting things we can do. Well, we don't just stop there. We have a lot of work to do in terms of ongoing conversations as a community. So this is all of us, and I know there's an organization that's kicking off. I know they have they're going to have a conference this fall, so stay tuned for that. I know some of our peers in the industry have been working very hard on that. We're engaged in that as well. But there's a lot of other questions that we need to begin this conversation, gather feedback from all sorts of stakeholders in this community to be able to move forward. So privacy, security, accountability, transparency, inclusion, and bias is a big one. I don't know if you just saw, we're wrestling with it in the United States, Europe. The EU just passed a big AI regulations earlier this week. And so they're way ahead of the game. And one of them was around ChatGPT and restrictions around perpetuating or not counteracting bias that's built into data sets. And so there's a lot of stuff going on. So if you haven't had a chance to read about that, this is just brand new stuff. I was reading about it yesterday, heard about it on the way in. But how do we not perpetuate bias, and how do we create and promote inclusion? Certainly ethics and compliance, and then just our own understanding of these tools and how we can partner with them. And it's really that idea of the yes and not really just these tools taking over for us or taking things from us. It's how can we scale what we all do as fundraising professionals. So there's a lot of conversation ahead. I hope everybody, if you're already participating in this webinar, you have an interest in this. I want to hear your voice. I hope you have an opportunity. Be on the lookout. Everybody's got something to share. Everybody's got an opinion or an idea. That's going to be important for this entire community, and we really encourage your participation moving ahead. So very quickly, I kind of went through our approach to answering these problems. Again, if you're thinking about these things more broadly, line of sight, transparency, meeting your speed of business, meeting your speed of data. It's a yes and to what we're currently doing, and then really design building things that fit our applications, not taking that application and trying to squeeze it in to try to make it work with what we do. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. This is just the beginning. We're barely through the preface. Maybe we're into chapter 1 of this journey, of this book forward about AI and fundraising, and we're excited to be a part of it and to have you all as a part of it as well too. So we've talked a little bit at length about some of the other applications beyond just generative, and I'm not just saying beyond just generative to be reductive to generative, and that's a whole itself vertical of AI applications. But there's a lot of other things, again, that we think are underemphasized or under-highlighted within our community that we're doing right now with clients, and we think are available and at your fingertips as well, whether you're creating them internally or you're working with a partner. So I know we kind of went over an arc of some of these. I would love my colleague Lauren, again, we have another quiz I'd like to do, just kind of thinking about AI applications. There's a poll up there, and I've shared a little bit about some of these other ideas, including generative is up there. Hopefully, is the poll live? Or we'll start the, there we go. People are voting. So which applications, feel free to rank kind of which of the ones that you're most interested in and will drive your business. So I'll leave this up for about another 30 seconds. Josh, did you have anything to add about
Yeah,
kind of
well, I
the
can jump
BWF
in and
approach?
maybe I'll answer one of the easier short questions while people are filling out the survey. One of the questions that came in the Q&A is what's the difference between AI and predictive modeling? And I think that's one I can handle without IBM experience. But for me personally, and I'll be an overly simplistic, but bear with me. A predictive model gets a snapshot in time. We've got some people doing something we like, who else looks like them, and they're scored by how they look like them. So let's say we look through our whole database and we want people that look like major donors based on behaviors, trends, capacity, other things. That would be a predictive model. Now, on AI would be on another extreme of a continuum, although the language is kind of being used casually. I'd say if we fix those data points and the score is changing over time, that would be a dynamic predictive model. A lot of times people are calling dynamic predictive models AI. It's fine. I don't judge people's language choice. Language does continue to evolve, but technical terms, that's an automated or a dynamic predictive model. And then an AI model might have that same outcome. We want lookalikes and so forth, but the criteria that we choose and the data are both changing as we go. So based on new information, different data points will have different weights. So imagine I'm doing the snapshot, I'm fixing the snapshot, like your score depends on how well you did on that test. So everyone's gonna have a different test, but the score stays the same as a dynamic model. AI is the test is changing as you're doing it. So it's enable you to change and to adapt to whatever factors, changing data, perceived biases that you've discovered, et cetera. So there's some aspect there. So I will stop and let you get it back to you, Alex.
Yeah, sure. So just very quickly, again, so generative AI gets all the news in the industry, but if we're looking at top 2 responses, certainly predictive AI, prospect ID, recommended action, and then AI simulation, which is really exciting. Scenario modeling, campaign planning, by volume are the largest number 1 and number 2 choices from this community that I would say. Now, again, this is just a snapshot, but this is why we were excited to talk about this today, because broadly in the kind of cultural zeitgeist, everyone's talking about generative AI. When it comes to our business and our focus, there's lots of other really exciting things happening and other applications that we hope you all continue to explore and drive the conversation moving ahead. And speaking of the conversation, where do we go from here? I think it's important to remember the milestones. Josh, I mean, we don't even maybe remember Rebecca Black's song, but we can remember the milestones of data science and how we got to the place that we are, and help us define new milestones and what does that look like. Certainly with anything, ask questions first. Technology is exciting, innovation is exciting. How does this help us raise more money? How does this help this specific business outcome? Let's start with those questions first and then work our way towards those exciting innovations and investments. Innovation is not as impactful as thoughtful innovation. So let's be thoughtful about it. Let's understand that even from the predictive side, it doesn't know the difference between a 1 and a 0 and what that represents, or it doesn't know if this is a big number or a small number, what that really should mean. And we all know that. We all can look at that, right? So, being thoughtful and being able to create parameters and design build a system that kind of extends our experience, knowledge, business process, and preference is definitely available and something we would recommend. And then the final part is definitely engage, right? So there's a community, it's a growing community, it's a very exciting time. I haven't seen the community this excited about data, what data can do, since probably about 2010, maybe 2009. So, share ideas, ask questions, lead a group, develop something, share success or challenges. We're all here to learn. There's no obvious path forward in terms of a monopoly. And we're all going to be a part of our solution moving ahead. And we're very excited. And hopefully that you're a part of that, the future as well. We all hope you can be. So I think we might have time for one more question, Josh, if you want to go ahead and.
Yep, I think there's several that are consistent around the integration of the generative with the coding process. One from Jordan on curious your thoughts on use of generative AI tools to write code programming without the expertise to validate the results prior to implementation, especially when it comes to statistical analysis. kind of the comments of now I don't have to learn this seems like a slippery slope, and feel free to I'll attempt it first, because I remember back in the day when I was first doing analytics, I was using point and click software. And I remember when SPSS went from a coding to a user interface with clicks, and people would be like, that's lazy statistics. And I'm like, it takes me a long time to type out to do a logistic regression type of thing. So that it actually saves me some time. So I think there is some validity of, can it expedite coding time? That might be really valid. I think the bigger concern is the lost art of validating and testing and knowing what was good and what wasn't. Alex, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would say, where is it pulling from? So there's good code and there's bad code, right? And there are some things, for example, from my time at IBM, there are things that people would use in the open source space that they felt comfortable with, and that were well-validated packages and codes. There's other stuff that I may have created for my master's thesis, and I posted it on some website, but it's not validated by either a computer scientist or a statistician or both. And so what is, which was part of the EU, you have to source where your stuff is coming from when it talks about data sets and so forth. For the generative for code is just making sure that, or hopefully, or the concern that we're grabbing correct code or accurate code and not just reprogramming and reproducing something that has an error, but it's been reproduced so many times that now just becomes kind of the standard for them. So that's something to definitely pay attention to.
And I see so many great questions. We're not going to have time to answer them all, but what we can do is I believe Lauren's help, we'll be able to download these questions and we can send out some answers to the group. I think there were some questions about the data that goes into the ChatGPT and other things, and does that go into another ecosystem? Those are legitimate concerns. We have our own internal policies to not put our own IP into that space. So I think that's part of what we're still coming together around. I know a few people asked about the organization and the conference info on the AI group. Alex, do you know that off the top of your head? I'm trying to remember if they've landed on a name.
Yeah, I have it on my here.
We will send that out as well with the Q&As.
Yeah, it's the Responsible AI for Fundraising group. It's going to be, and there's going to be a conference, I believe, sometime this September. We're certainly a part of that community, so we will send that out. We'll be promoting that on our channels, on our LinkedIn too. But you can find in the community, it's out there, and it's really going to be kind of the first, as far as I understand, a collective gathering of voices and people interested in applications. So we just talked about one specific area in the neighborhood, but there's a whole city of applications out there, and we're really excited to partner and see what else other groups and organizations come up with, and again, to really learn and have a conversation. So Josh and I love innovation like this because we learn as much. Actually, we learn more than we're able to share because there's so many other great ideas out there. So we really appreciate your participation here today. And allowing us to share with you. Let me just quickly, I would be remiss if I didn't share. We built it in here. There's a QR code. Please feel free. I'll leave this up on the screen. Click that, give us some feedback, and tell us what we can do and what's helpful. And then for the remaining Q&As, at least for the ones that we can attribute, we will do our very best to be able to follow up with you directly and answer. And then, as always, please feel free to be in touch. You know, as you can see, Josh and I will talk all day about all this stuff. We love the conversation. We love the community. We love ideas. Add us on LinkedIn. Send us an email. Tell us what you're thinking. Share ideas. And with that, we look forward to our next opportunity to connect and the next conversation we can have.
Thanks, everybody.